on the 2,000, because they put it on my,
I'd like to call the Board of Finance meeting for Monday, June 15th, 2015 to order. First order of business is public forum. Anyone wishing to address the board in public forum? Hearing none, move on to item 2, and that would be 2.1, the regular meeting of May 18th, 2015. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second? Comments, questions, changes, deletions, etc.?
I had two
Okay.
real small revisions. On page 2, section 3.1, the first sentence of the third paragraph, Mr. Hoey stated there's a discussion about Millman. I think it should be just revise that. It just should be due
instead of
in
do.
the salary experience study. And then the next paragraph down, second line, committee doesn't, I think, should be think it is the right thing to do at this point. And then on the next page, second paragraph, the one that starts Mr. Hoey, I think it should be, Mr. Hoey asked if a letter from the Board of Finance supporting the first selectman and finance director with regard to a salary study by Millman would be helpful. I think that's what
That's
we're
right, yep, that's
suggesting.
exactly it. Any others?
And I had one other on page 5 under revenues, and since Ms. Villano's here, I maybe just my memory that's inaccurate. Ms. Villano said they've collected 110.3% of the revenue budget. That just seems high. I mean, I don't mean to put anyone on the spot. This is just for purposes of making sure the minutes were accurate.
Well, it's less than that in May, so
So
it may not be accurate. I can check last month. See what it is.
Any others? Nope.
those are the only ones that I...
Good. All right, motion to accept the minutes as amended and adjusted and pending the clarification on the percent of revenue budget. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? No, good. Item 3, correspondence, standing building committee minutes, and there were none that were available.
However-
But Mike Ailes did forward some information along. Ken, you want to just go over?
Yeah, he forwarded this information along by mid-afternoon, so I suppose
I did not have an opportunity to see it
Yeah.
this afternoon.
I just happened to pick it up. Once again, he said that they hadn't gotten around to getting the minutes to us. That's the second month in standing. But he hit these highlights. The police department HVAC project should be closing out in July. The AMS Adams window door renovation project has a few minor P-list items left, as well as the district-wide security upgrades. MJES security upgrades renovations projects is starting on June 8th with actual work upon school closing. AMS elevator, submittals in review, vendor on board, waiting on schedule from Schindler Elevator. I guess that's the chosen vendor. Science wing renovations project to keep utility project and scope of works costs down. Town PW, Public Works, is doing trenching. Bulk of the work from June 20 to 22nd. Phase 1, about $1 million, is on schedule. It's out to bid 6/7. Bids will be received by July 1, approval estimated for July 7. Construction to take place between August 1 and September 30, a 2-month block, and there are 5 alternatives to be considered depending on how the bids come back. So that's in the neighborhood of $1 million. One of the final item he reported was one of our on-call architectural consultants has been approved for a nominal fee to look at reimbursement for the BMS window replacement project, and that's it.
Okay, good, thank you. Pension committee minutes. The pension return is starting to creep back up. The year-to-date is now back up to 2.6%, I think. Not? Not? Okay. Anything else on,
Yeah, I have a question on the asset allocation strategy. You know, there's not a lot of information in terms of the asset class that they're investing in. It's kind of like saying I have a General Motors car. I mean, it could be anything. Like Schaefer Cullen, they have small, they have dividend-producing type of investments. Invesco could be international, could be small cap, could be emerging markets. I think in order for us to understand how it's invested, because I'm just guessing, I assume Reinhardt is probably mid-cap, but it could be small, it could be large. I think you should request that they indicate the asset class that they're investing in so we can get a feel for the mix, you know.
Well, actually, we do have it. I'm only giving you the summary page. I can give you the detailed pages that shows the activity for each manager, and on those columns for each, they do specify, I specify the asset class.
Yeah, it would be important, because I know in the minutes, somebody wanted to know what's the breakdown international between growth and value. To my understanding, Winthrop and Invesco, they're both growth managers. I don't even see a value manager here. But, you know, not that that is that important, because, you know, the asset class, be it large, international, I think that's sufficient in itself. But if you wanted to get a breakdown, I mean, there isn't the value manager here.
What I can do is, next month, I will add the descriptions on that
Okay.
particular summary, so you don't get too many pieces of paper, because it just gets overwhelming. And then you'll have that, at least you can follow along with the minutes, and it will make more sense.
Okay, good, thank you very much,
Okay.
appreciate that.
anything further?
So I did notice that they moved on the item we tabled, on item 4,
Right.
a letter that you had sent
Right.
on the salary experience study, so they're moving forward with that.
Yes, they are.
We had tabled that item.
They are. When will that study take place and be?
It probably will be another 2 months or so. We're gathering all the information now for them, and it takes them a good 6 weeks to get everything back.
So it'll be something we'll use in our evaluation for next year's budget development, I would assume.
I hope so.
If we make any modifications, not saying that we are, but if any modifications, it would be effective with the next budget cycle. Good. Anything else on pension? I just wanted to note, it was interesting to see on item 5.2, Philip Russell receiving a distribution. Phil used to sit in Sheila's chair many years ago when Joe and I were rookie Board of Finance members. And it looks like our old friend Phil is finally retiring. It was a long time ago, Joe. Yeah. Does he still run that closet, Charlie's Closet thing, the thing for medical equipment?
Used and traded medical equipment.
Yes, that was,
Chelsea Foundation.
I don't think so.
Chelsea Foundation, I'm not sure.
'cause he started that. He started that here in Guilford.
Charlie's Closet.
No, I don't think he
Not
runs
Charlie's
that.
Closet, but it was
Chelsea's Foundation.
There's-
It was named after daughter
his
Chelsea.
daughter, right? That's what I thought.
The person, his daughter Chelsea, just passed away.
Sorry to hear
Weeks
that.
ago, so I'm not sure if the foundation is
It's still intact. Okay. Item 4, review and approve the report of expenditures for town government for May 2015. Sheila. Just a little change in the order.
We're changing the order.
Yes, Mr. Sands is has a conflict and will be here a little bit later. So we have to keep Sheila talking until Mr. Sands arrives. I think. That's fine, we can move him further down.
Are you up to the challenge?
Revenue?
Revenue.
There you go.
Revenue.
Thank you.
May 31st,
Yep.
11 months of the way through the year. We have 1 month to go, but we've already collected 100%, 100.7%. Last month, I just checked, it was 100.3%. There's an extra.
Extra digit there.
that translates into $631,000 over budget as at the end of May. Last year, between May 31st and technically July 31st, because of the departments we accrue for, we collected $400,000. So on the local side, we could be looking at about $1 million.
Right.
And on the state side, if you see you notice the 113,000,
right.
that's another surplus there that we've talked about.
Yep.
The $1.5 million is the ECS grant money that will come in.
Okay.
So there's not a problem there. So we're looking at over $1 million, I would predict, on revenue. Last month, the Park and Rec's revenue wasn't posted for the month of April.
Okay.
This month, the revenues to date include April and May.
April, I was wondering why that was so high.
I have a question about Park and Rec revenue.
Okay.
I see the categories, the 4 categories. I would think, from what I've heard and what I've seen, is that 4th category would be growing, and maybe that should be revisited and broken down. There are so many classes and programs that are,
They're outside.
I would think, revenue enhancers, aren't they? Or do they fit in that
So are you
category?
talking about the miscellaneous category?
Yeah.
It's still a small number at $1,500. I mean, they're at $1,600 actual. We certainly can break it down.
No,
No,
none of it's
I-
that small. I was thinking of things like admissions and tuitions and fees for various programs.
Well, those funds are all run outside of the budget.
They're
Those are
outside of
pro-
our
Those are
budget.
program fees, separate,
Program fees are totally outside. So where do you find program fees?
not,
They're in a special fund,
Fund.
not part of the general fund because it's
Okay,
not
that's
taxpayer
outside
dollars.
this altogether.
right.
Yeah.
Any other questions on Park and Rec? All right, Sheila, were there other things on revenue you wanted to highlight?
No, I think that's really it. If you look down at the remaining to collect, almost every department has parentheses around it, which is
Right, means they're exceeded.
it means that they've collected over their budget, and it's almost every department.
Right.
I have one question. Road inspection fees, is that mainly DDR?
This year, that's what's caused the increase, yes.
So that's a kind of a one-time only kind of.
Well, next year
Bump.
too, right? Are we anticipating some?
I'm not quite sure how the road inspection fees go, if
Okay.
it's, that
more the
further into
building
the project, I
permits.
think it's more in the beginning.
Let's see.
Any others? Revenue? Expenditures?
Okay. Expenditures, well, we recorded the $100,000 that you approved last month, the transfer between contingency and legal. So there's just one
Is that reflected?
department with a small, with a small departmental overage, and that's town registrar of voters.
Right.
We'll take care of that next month. That's just due to the poll workers that were charged from April referendum during the month of May.
Okay.
I usually start to make projections by looking at the payroll, the salaries, and I've done that for I think the past 2 months. I've reported about 250,000, and we're still at that same number.
Same number, okay.
So that hasn't changed. I think that non-personnel will probably come in about even. That's my conservative prediction. Possibly a little bit better.
Yeah.
But even so, if you take the 250,000 and then the million, conservative million, we're looking at a $1.2 million surplus without the Board of Ed,
Right.
and that's still conservative. There are blanket encumbrances that have been canceled.
Okay.
The number has been reduced from last month, and for example, I spoke with the police chief today, and he has several blankets that he's canceling.
Right.
So you'll see a reduction there, and then you'll see some last-minute invoices as well that, that we had maybe anticipated, some utilities that aren't encumbered. All in all, though, I think that we're looking towards increasing our fund balance to over $7 million
Okay.
undesignated.
And that would get us, what, closer to 7%?
It's a big change.
7%
The
number.
old days.
Over that. Or,
Okay.
yeah.
Very good.
Good timing since we're going to the bond market in the fall. Chance for rating increase, rating improvement. Sheila and I had a discussion about this, and
Yeah, it's a tough one because as our results have been great, they've been steady and consistent and growing. They still look for that high fund balance that, sometimes even 15 to 20%. And that's just not what we feel is appropriate here.
so we're sort of stuck in this place that's tough to move out of, as opposed to what we discussed earlier.
It seems
The
that
town,
way.
the town of Hamden finally made the appropriate pension contribution, which they hadn't done in many years, and they get a bond upgrade.
Right.
Doesn't make sense. So, I did have a couple of questions here. For both registrars of voters and legal, looks as if legal, you revised the budget amount from the original? Is that,
That's the transfer that we
that's
did.
the transfer?
Yes.
Okay. Registrar of voters, not yet, right? Okay.
We'll do that next month.
When the agenda came out last week, I was surprised that there weren't more transfers there. Typically, this is a month where there are usually more transfers.
The one transfer that I needed to do early, I did last month for legal.
Okay,
A lot of the others that were kind of on the border, I cleaned up with our own internal
Within the fund.
adjustments, yes, or, reimbursement from special funds.
okay.
And then I'll just do one last one, maybe not even next month. We'll have to see how it goes. Maybe just in July, right before we do our final closing.
Okay. Anybody else have questions on
Yeah,
expenditures?
I have a
Peter?
question regarding the retirement sick leave. It really kind of jumped up quite a bit. I guess it was budgeted for 100,000, came in at 193. Was that a sudden retirement, or?
No, it's a very hard number to budget. We know all the people that are eligible for it, and we can presume certain retirements, but you just never know, and it never seems to work the way we think. It's always a surprise. But don't forget, we have $220,000 or so in reserved fund balance for just that reason. So if we have a good year this year, as what I'm thinking we will, we won't touch the reserve fund balance, the 220. We'll save it for a year when we might not have, we might need it, and this account is high. If we need it, though, it's there for that exact reason.
Thank you.
Is retirement sick leave one of the items that has been part of contract negotiations?
That has gone away, it's since 1992, it's been out of the contract, except for very few,
Right. So,
One or two
So our
people.
our longer-term liabilities are
it's reducing.
shrinking. Okay.
Have we received any of those FEMA payments? Should they be reflected in here? Or have we not received them?
We're in the process, FEMA was in our offices twice last week, and we're in the process of closing out some of the projects that are, that require like an official closeout, and then we'll get a check. Most of it has been accrued, though, so you won't necessarily see any substantial funds in the revenue side.
Any updates on FEMA for this past winter?
Well, we have been declared a disaster zone, so I put together about $144,000, and there's some more to come once we get some numbers for curb repairs from Public Works, and then we'll submit that. If I can get some kind of a commitment, I could book a receivable at the end of the year, but I may not. In good years, it's not really necessary, and especially if you're not certain that you can measure the exact amount that you're going to receive.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Peter.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I have a question. It's not a big part of the budget, but I've noticed the fuel for park and recreation is up about 31%. What is that because of the snow and they got involved with snow removal, or is it just the cost of fuel?
Well,
Because you had a budget of 25,000, the actual number is 32,824.
there could be various reasons there for that. Most likely, it's the cost of fuel, the diesel fuel.
Oh, I see.
Fuel is hard to predict as well. We did have a fixed pricing, but I can't really tell you exactly. I mean, I could take a look at that and see if there's anything unusual.
Well, it's not a big part, but,
Well-
you know, it is, you know, it is $3,400 over budget,
With a month up.
or actually, it's more than that.
It's a 7,000
$7,000,
yeah.
over budget,
Yeah.
31%. It's a fairly big number. I could look at it and make sure that it's accurate.
Back to police department. Looks as if a big portion of your these are employee related non-expenditures or surplus are going to come out of salaries in the police department. Is that vacancies? Is it,
Yes.
how many positions are they down? Have they been filled? Are they about to be filled?
One is going to be filled this week, I believe.
Yeah, at this point, they're just about filled,
Okay.
going to the academy.
Right.
But then you also have savings because of retirements.
Right.
And the ones that were filled at lower
Lower
salaries.
levels, yeah. Okay. Good. All right. Any other questions on expenditures? None? All right, warrants, special fund weekly checks or warrants, any questions? All right, take your time. Sheila, while Ken is looking for his,
I have it.
well, you got it? Okay.
I was just curious as to where we were with on the high school project with Fusco receiving a very substantial
Progress
payment
payments.
this month of
To-
about 6.3 million.
I've been waiting, there's been a couple of bookkeeping issues that have kept me from finishing a report for the high school. I can do that now, actually, and I can also record I can also show you the state grants that we've received. If you'd like, I could send that to you ahead of next month's meeting, but they're winding down,
Yeah.
you know, and we're actually planning a bond sale in August
Okay.
for more funding. Why don't I send you a report by the end of the week on the high school? I'll finish
Actually,
it up.
according to Mike Ailes' report here, his summary on the high school project, he reports here that it is, the new building should have started to be occupied on June 10th. The project's considered 90% complete. So wondering, does this 6.3 million reflect?
No, see, that's where they're committed. It's committed, and they haven't spent 90% of the cost of the project at this point.
Any others on warrants? No? No?
I'm just curious about the reports themselves. It seems to skip pages.
Which one?
Like, on some of these, I can't find pages 18, 20, and 22. Like, I find pages 17, 19, and 21. I mean, is there some just paging discrepancy, or
That's,
It does look that way.
doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
it sort of hopscotches around, and yet it doesn't seem to be incomplete. It may just be the
No,
pagination.
it looks like there's pages missing.
The pages are missing.
That's what it looks like.
yeah.
Well, they're missing on both reports then. Both sets of documents.
Yeah, it seems to be missing the even numbers.
No, actually, yeah, it is missing the even.
Even numbers, right?
And the-
So we printed odd numbers on
Both sides.
both sides.
Yeah.
That's unusual.
That is unusual. Time to look at that program, that print program.
Sorry,
No?
I'll send
All
you.
right. Revised copy, yeah, just send
Yes.
that electronically, don't
Yes.
bother mailing that, please. Anything on general fund, weekly checks? Nope. Okay. Medical benefits, Tough month.
Medical, we've reached the stop loss as far as our premium goes, which was $845,000. We've now there's been $1 million covered under the stop loss, so that was a good business decision that we made, and I assume that even next month we should probably see that number increase. So if you look on your report, I did a little calculation sort of in the middle, top middle, where the claims over the ISL were $1,056,000. That's what the insurance covered.
Right.
And the 845 is our premium and 210 is the savings. It took 11 months to get to that point. There are the most catastrophic claims that I've ever seen. It's 1.5 pages long. So that's the unfortunate part.
And are some of those relatively new, which means they'll start fresh
They
in
will-
July?
Yes, everything will start fresh. Some of the earlier ones, though, that earlier in the year have pretty much wound down, where you don't really see many more claims
Right.
at all.
Okay.
And newer ones are continuing to crop up. So we're going to find that some are just going to be just short of the stop loss
Loss.
by June, and then they're going to start over.
Start all over again. Okay. Timing. All right, we're still projecting.
But yes, I
healthy
need to
surplus.
say that, yes.
Yes,
We're
please.
projecting almost a $600,000 surplus, and that's probably where we're going to be at this point, because June is historically a light month, and then with the stop loss, it'll help as well. And last year, we ended the year with having to transfer funds from town and Board of Ed, and then we had an $8,000 surplus. We theoretically were even. And this year, we're at $597 to $600,000 without any additional transfers. So we're in a really good spot. And we always tell the rating agencies that this is sort of an extension of the general fund, because the contributions come from the general fund.
Right. Are we comfortable that $600,000 is a pretty good place to be at? Should we be concerned it needs to be more, like an average 1 month's premium payments? Should that be a target, a threshold?
It's very close to that. The IBNR was $862,000 last year.
Right.
At June 30th, so we could make that number.
Okay.
And that puts us in the position to even take a look at fully insured policies
Please,
once you
right.
have your IBNR covered. But I think that we're okay with
We're good with that
where
number?
we are now, and the stop loss seems to be working for us.
Good. Any other questions on the insurance? No? Building permits, any questions? Golf course. Our May revenues. So it looks like we're still going to be a little bit short. Now June should traditionally be a little better than May. June revenues are traditionally better than May revenues, correct? But at this point, we're looking at a $36,000, almost $37,000 deficit this year, and that is after the $30,000 transfer.
After the contribution.
Yeah.
Where do we stand as far as an outside management company coming in to take over the golf course?
Actually, last week I've sent a letter to the chairman of the Golf Course Commission asking for an update of where they are putting together the RFP for an outside management firm for next season. So I'm waiting for that update. And they are meeting tomorrow night, as a matter of fact.
Anything else on the golf course? No?
Neil, it does look like they're performing better than they did last year, at least from what I can tell in terms of revenues up slightly. Still operating at a loss, but if I'm reading this correctly. through the first 5 months of the year anyhow.
That's January, yeah, that's on a fiscal basis. I
That's
mean,
where it
that's,
gets
that's a
confusing.
calendar basis.
Yeah.
If you look at the fiscal basis, July to May,
Yeah.
they're down.
Okay.
Down about 7%.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to accept the bills from the town?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Abstentions? Recusal? None. Thank you. Okay, item 5, review and accept the report of expenditures for the Board of Education for May 2015. Linda Trudeau and Ted Sands as the rotating board member. Ted, what would you like to share with us?
Okay. Well, expenditures for the month of May were $5,911,083.33. Our expenditures and encumbrances through the end of May were 82.56% of the budget as compared to 81.02% last year. May was interesting in that we had fairly significant revenue totaling $423,885.41, which consisted primarily of the excess cost grant from the state on as reimbursement for tuition and special education transportation costs. As we have discussed with the Board of Finance in the past, the state, in theory, owes us 100% of certain of these costs, but for several years the legislature has been claiming that they don't have 100% of the money, and so we're always playing a bit of a guessing game as to what they're going to pay up. We had estimated that they would be in the low 70s. It turned out that they paid 78% this year. So that was a slight favorable occurrence for us, although I would still point out that 22% somehow slipped out of our hands. But we also got some Medicaid payments for $107,883.41, which basically related to previous years. And we received $16,050 as tuition payments for two students, well, really one and a fraction students, who are attending the schools but who are not residents of Guilford. And then there was $144, which we got as a credit from Coca-Cola. The components of this, the salaries were basically in line with expenditures, except that May we had 3 payrolls instead of 2. So, that evens out over time. The employee benefits would have paralleled the salaries. Purchase services were approximately where we expected. Tuition continues to run higher than the budget. We just, in the new budget, we've taken, I think, a closer look at these costs, but in the budget we're working with, we clearly underestimated some of the outplacement costs that we were going to incur. Supplies and materials are actually lower than previous years because the tuition and special education transportation expenses have been running ahead of budget. We've had a discretionary spending freeze in effect at the schools to try and limit non-priority expenditures, and so that's had a salutary effect. Our capital expenditures to date are slightly lower than the previous year, although that may be made up next month. And the transportation is higher. Once again, this is the excess costs relating to special education transportation. Frankly, we just made some assumptions on cost savings which have not proved to be the case. And so in the new budget, we have taken that into account. The warrants totaled $2,093,900.28, and I'd be happy to answer any questions with respect to either the expenditures or the warrants.
Thank you, Ted, for that summary.
Yes.
Ken?
Yeah, I have a question for you about outplacements, which I remember when Mrs. Balistraci was here last month, she said how hard it was to estimate it, and that one or two outplacements can throw the whole budget in a cocked hat, essentially. My question is whether we are not anticipating increases in outplacement for the new year. How does the budget compare in that category? The outplacement budget that we had this year, which was underestimated
Right.
by
The-
unpredictable elements, granted,
Yes.
and the unpredictability is likely to exist in the new year as well. What is that number in the new year as opposed to the number in the current year?
So when we did the budget, we looked at the number of students that were going to be outplaced for the coming year, because there were some students that were aging out of the system that we were no longer going to be responsible for. And then we added two more for additional outplacements as a conservative
Yeah.
estimate of what could happen during the year.
Is that how many we were under this current year?
Right.
We were under 3.
So
But
now
we-
we're estimating that we,
We have
An additional
added
two,
two that we don't know of yet.
Right.
okay.
And we have increased the amount per student because these outplacements can vary. It depends on the needs of the student. One of the things that happened which affected the budget was that we had, I think, 2 students whose physical condition over the summer deteriorated in a way that had not been anticipated. And so they needed additional services. For example, a nurse on the transportation bus, and we had to outplace them to a different facility that could deal with some of the physical limitations that they had developed. That type of thing is very hard to predict.
The larger question for me is, right, currently, we're at 91% expended rather, with unexpended balance of about 211,000. The May run rate was 309. Are there additional excess cost monies available? So that's
That's it.
probably going to be over by, what's your projection at this point? Is another 309,000 a reasonable number to expect for June expenditures and tuition?
Right now, my projection for tuition is going to be, as I do anticipate some other funds coming back to us. We have a couple
Right.
other student tuition reimbursements that we're waiting for, so I'm actually predicting that our tuition's going to be 180,000 over budget.
180,000 over?
We're expecting another 50,000 back
Okay,
to us, which will go as a credit to tuition.
okay. So that suggests that the June expenditures are going to be significantly higher than 309,000.
There are a number of bills that we are anticipating
Paying
receiving.
coming through.
Yes. We started making calls, asking for them.
Where are they, please?
Where are
Yeah,
they?
yeah,
So we can
please.
pay you, please, yes.
So like the bus company years ago, Joe. It was.
I have a question about the legal services, being the Why would the legal services be up so much?
Well, there are two factors there. The primary one is that we have been in negotiation this year with, 3 or 4 of our collective bargaining units. And so we have a legal advisor during this. And these are normally multi-year contracts. It just happens to be this year we've got 3 of these that we're dealing with. And then we have some cases where there is some litigation about what services are required. And that's the way it is. Sometimes you get these and sometimes you don't.
I also noted, again, looking back at our own minutes from the Board of Education segment last month, that we had overestimated the amount of savings in-house special ed.
Well, I think that relates to a difference in the needs of certain of the students. I think there was a feeling that certain of the students could be brought in-house, and because of some physical limitations, that turned out to, in a couple of cases, not to be possible.
But I think the cost avoidance numbers are still very strong
That's what she said.
at budget presentation. Dr. Freeman did a curve, a projection that showed, had we not instituted
Right.
the in-house program, we could have seen our expenditures rise dramatically higher than
So
they
we're
are.
seeing the benefits, but there are mitigating factors that are.
There can be. I mean, our ability to deal with certain physical limitations is limited.
It's just, I think it needs to be said again, the in-house program is very successful.
Yes, and I think that
From
the parents
several
have been
levels.
The parents have been very pleased with that program for the people who can qualify for it.
Right. And I think, my understanding is we should continue to see
Yes,
greater participation, because for a number of the children who may benefit from that program, they've started matriculating elsewhere, and bringing them back in district was not always a
That's
choice they'd
hard.
make to,
That's hard.
bringing them into a new program from one that they know and are comfortable with.
yeah,
So
That's
as
right.
the younger children start coming through the system, it's more likely we're going to capture that population
Yes.
for our in-house programs.
yes. That's the plan.
But we still should be aware that there are limitations with the in-house program.
Correct.
If we ourselves are,
Yes.
have overestimated, it means there are limitations to it that we perhaps had not been anticipating. That was my point.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, a lot of this was fairly new, and, we're kind of finding what works and what doesn't.
Agreed. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one other question. I've noticed that under transportation, there are 2 categories that are significantly over budget. One of them is special educational buses
Yep.
and the fuel special for the special education buses. They're both up, fuel's up about 65%, and the buses are up 40%. Dollar-wise, it's almost $200,000.
Right. All right. What happened here was, there were 2 things. One, when we have an increase in outplacements, then you're going to have more special ed transportation. And some of these outplacements are not close to Guilford. I mean, they're unfortunately certain students who have physical limitations. The best place for them may be a 45 or 50-minute bus ride away. And so when you do a couple of those, it can really affect that line. That's part of it. The other part of it was that we thought when we put the budget together that we would be able to coordinate more effectively by putting 2 and 3 students on the same bus. But it turned out that the placements didn't geographically work out as well as we had hoped. And we ended up having to run more buses that had less kids on them than we had anticipated. So, I mean, you have to do what you have to do for these, for the children, and that's what ended up happening. So the bus runs are in some cases are longer. That's why the fuel is up, and we ended up having to run more buses than we expected.
In town.
No, out of town.
Special ed
For the
education
special
buses.
ed buses. No, we've done okay on the regular buses.
Well, that was the natural question. Was this just a question of budgeting? Because we're, at this point, $145,000 available balance with a run rate in May of $10,000 for regular bus fuel. Suggests that would be $125,000 to $135,000 under budget on the regular fuel.
Right.
Is there a reason that?
Well, the fuel,
The cost is down on the fuel.
the allocation between the
two,
fuel
that's what, yeah.
is really based on a percentage of the budget that the bus costs are.
Right.
So it's really just an allocation. We don't have an exact science of breaking out how much is used by the special ed.
Right.
So it goes off of the cost of the transportation. We used to allocate it based on just the budget numbers.
Right.
Then we broke it out to the actual costs. So we look at the actual cost of the special ed buses for a month and the regular transportation for a month and allocate the fuel that way. Next year in the budget, fuel is one line.
Good.
Because it's all the one fuel tank that's at STA. So we're not going to be allocating it out or trying to on some formula that we've used in the past.
Right, because I think the cost for special education buses the increases in those costs have greatly exceeded the increases in the cost for the regular buses because we've got locked-in contracts with SDA, and they were all, I think they were pretty favorable the last time we went to contract negotiations with
Very
them.
favorable.
They were in the
Yes.
2%.
We do
you
bid-
know? So, the special ed costs are increasing at far greater than
Yes.
2%
We do
annual,
bid
which is
this
going to
out.
skew your formula you use to
Right.
allocate fuel.
We
That's
do
correct.
bid it out, but when we started bidding it out a few years ago, we saw some better decreases, better prices. Now that we've been bidding it out and everybody knows there's only a few
Few providers.
providers of these services. Now, they all see what everybody's
Yeah,
bidding, the
you're not
costs are
suggesting
creeping back.
collusion, but it's,
No, no.
it's market
But-
forces coming to bear.
Right.
Right, and
Right.
So we're not seeing the great savings that we did
Did
4 or
years
5
ago.
years ago when we first started bidding this out.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a motion to approve, to accept the bills from the Board of Education for the month of May in an amount of $5,414,726?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Yeah. Mr. Bloss, the chairman and I had a conversation late last week, and he has some information he'd like to share with us, and it's germane to the value of our educational spend.
Well, we do spend, thank you, Mr. Hoy, we do spend a lot of time, of course, talking about expenses and talking about where we can be more efficient and where we can economize, but I like to remind people that there are two sides of the equation. There is not only the expense side of the equation, but there's also the product side, the service. What is it that the service that we are providing, and how is it recognized, how is it perceived by not only our community, but also by outside observers. There was a very lengthy article in the Hartford Courant last week about per pupil spending in each of the Connecticut school districts. And I've I've at some of the budget hearings in years past, I've offered some data about what some of the rankings are, what the State Department of Office and Policy Management places us. Well, we got some updated information from in the current article is based on census data. That it's much more comprehensive. It includes federal spending as well as state spending, and it includes really, as far as I can tell, it includes everything. At least that's what the representation is. We are, according to this, 97th in the state of Connecticut in terms of per pupil spending. 97th. We are, and I think one of the things I'd like to try to do is to figure out where we are based on the product, where we are based on the service, the educational, instructional quality. I think you heard me talking, well, I'm not sure I've actually raised this to you. The U.S. News and World Report's rankings came out, I think, since the last time I was before your board. And we are ranked as, according to the U.S. News criteria, we are ranked 17th in the state. However, 3 of those schools are either magnet schools or charter schools. So out of public high schools, traditional public high schools, we are 14th in the state. So if you put the 2 lists together, where do we stand in terms of these towns with their per student spending, and where do we stand ourselves? There are 3 districts in the state of Connecticut that have a higher high school ranking in the U.S. News and World Report table at a lower spending per pupil. Simsbury, which has almost the same expenditures as us, East Lyme, which is a spot ahead of us and has almost exactly the same expenditures as us, and then West Hartford with their 2 high schools, and the difference for them is less than a 2% difference in terms of per student spending. There are 11 towns in the state of Connecticut ahead of us on the U.S. News list that spend more than Guilford per student. And interestingly, there are approximately 85 towns in the state of Connecticut, or in counting regional districts, that spend more, 85, that spend more per student with lower performance according to the U.S. News data. So by any analysis, if you can count on less than one hand the number of schools that are ranked higher with a lower per student spending, we think we're in pretty good shape. The Connecticut Coalition for Achievement Now, we're on their top 10 list. The top 5 schools on that top 10 list are all in the top 30 in terms of per student spending, and they're all, not coincidentally, Fairfield County towns. Actually, the first 6 on the list are Fairfield County towns, and 6 out of the top 10. We are almost evenly matched with at least on the CONCAN list, with Avon, Madison, Canton, and we're actually quite a bit below Amity in terms of per student spending. So this is objective data, and I can give you a link to the article, and it is interesting to look and dig down and to see what the expectations are, what the performance is based on some of the data. But education is not inexpensive. We don't suggest that it is for a minute. But however, compared to using the objective data, we think that the administration here and the faculty here, and parents for that matter, have really done an outstanding job in trying to deliver the best educational value for the dollar. So I've got one copy of each of that for each of you, and the link to the website is I think on the last page. So unless there are any questions, that's all I wanted to bring to the board's attention. I know you're very focused on this part of it, but not surprisingly. However, I think you care as much as we do about the quality of the educational service, and I think this is really good news.
And you're prepared for the high school graduation speech that you have to give?
I'm working on it. It'll be done by Friday.
It'll be good. Yeah, Bill, thank you for sharing this information. This is important, and you're right. This shows the value for the spend, and this community is benefiting greatly from the precious dollars that we give to the education of our children in this town, but we're maximizing return on it. That's the way it looks. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 6, consider and take possible action on a request from the Board of Selectmen with regard to capital plan purchase. We're going to need to table that till next month because the Board of Selectmen did not take action on it today. So is there a motion to table?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second, all in favor? Aye. I'm going to ask about opposed. Committee reports, I think we heard something from Mike.
Mike reported on the high school project.
Yep.
I gave you one of the items earlier. Work's mostly focused on FF&E and technology incorporation and move-in. The new building should start to be occupied as of June 10. Due to the loss of school days, the abatement schedule changed, but will only be 5 days later in early July. Baseball field punch list has been completed. The move out from the old building should have begun on June 6th. June 29th, and I think Jason modified that to about July 7th or 8th. He said that's the last time anyone can enter the old school building so that the demolition can begin. So that's it.
That's it.
Kiss the old building goodbye on July 8th.
Make sure everybody's out of there first.
That's right.
Any old business? Any new business? Public forum? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you all.